claimed to be a prophet. So I want the Muslims to understand the implication of these statements and these sources. Muhammad, before he claimed to be a prophet, was observing the month of Ramadan. In fact, it was during this month that Gabriel supposedly came to Muhammad. So the fast of Ramadan was a pagan fast. According to these sources, there were pagan idols erected by the pagans around the Kaaba. And according to one source specifically, Muhammad would run around the Kaaba as these 360 idols were around it. Let me read the source. This comes from Sirat Rasulullah. Sirat Rasulullah, and it's available in English, translated by Alfred Guillaume. It's a how do you pronounce the last? Guillaume. All right, French last name, man. I don't know. It's spelled Guillaume, but he says Guillaume. All right, Alfred Guillaume translated Sirat Rasulullah. It's the oldest extant biography on the life of Muhammad, which was edited by Ibn Hisham. It was written down by Ibn Ishaq, edited by Ibn Hisham, translated in English by Alfred Guillaume. This comes from the English translation, Life of Muhammad, page 170. Now let me read this quotation. When the apostle of God had finished his period of seclusion, when he would go to the higher caves and meditate during the month of Ramadan, the fasting month that Muslims till this day observe, he returned to Mecca. In the first place, he performed the circumambulation of the Kaaba, the running around the Kaaba that the Muslims do till this day when they perform Hajj or Umrah, as was his wont, meaning his practice. While he was doing it, Waraqah met him and said, "O son of my brother, tell me what thou hast seen and heard." Notice what this is saying, that after his encounter with the spirit who identified himself as Gabriel, Muhammad returned to Mecca, ran around the Kaaba during the time in which there were still 360 idols. Now, why would the prophet of monotheism, the prophet who supposedly brought the strictest form of monotheism known, why would he observe the practice of running around the Kaaba when it was littered with idols? 360 to be exact. And we'll find that later on, when he went to Medina, he did it again. When he performed Umrah, he again ran around the Kaaba when the idols were still in place. Why is he observing such practices when this house is littered with idols, an abomination to the true God? Now, before I move on to my next point,
I have a question for you guys. It's been said when Islam came, they cleaned the Kaaba from all of these idols that was inside.
That's what I just read, yes.
All right. And the other one, from where this black stone came, it's a meteorite or it really came from heaven for Abraham to build a temple on it there? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. As far as the cleansing of the Kaaba, yes, Muhammad smashed the idols that were there, with the exception.
And Jesus was there too.
Oh, you mean the picture? I
know
the picture, yes. He's talking about a portrait of Jesus and Abraham. Go ahead. Yes.
As far as the cleansing of the temple, though, it's very important to recognize that originally Muslims prayed facing Jerusalem.
Precisely.
But Muhammad would visit the Kaaba. Muhammad would visit the Kaaba regularly, even as a Muslim, when he was a persecuted prophet in Mecca. So Muhammad is in Mecca. He has no control. There are still the 360 idols there. Muhammad visits this pagan shrine regularly and kisses the black stone. Interestingly, later on, when the Jews rejected Muhammad and they understood the Torah enough to realize that he's a false prophet, Muhammad turned away from Jerusalem as the direction that Muslims should pray to, and turned facing the Kaaba in Mecca. So for several years before Muslims conquer Mecca and destroy the idols, Muslims are bowing down and facing a house of worship that is filled with 360 pagan idols. Now, just imagine this. The prophet of monotheism comes along and says, you want to know where we're going to pray to? We're going to pray facing those 360 pagan idols. Why would you do that? Because that was what the pagans did. That's what Muhammad had been raised to do. That's what the vast majority of his followers had been raised to do. They had been raised to bow down to these 360 idols. And they were very comfortable doing this. This seemed natural to them. Abu Bakr, all of the early Muslim converts from Mecca would have grown up bowing down to this pagan temple. And that's exactly what Muhammad did for a period of several years. While it was still surrounded with pagan idols, Muslims are bowing down to it. Now, as far as the black stone, yes, this does seem to be some sort of meteorite. It's interesting to note that other places around the world, when a meteorite would fall to Earth, they would take this up as an object of veneration and worship. In ancient Ephesus, they were known to have a meteorite. They were known to have a meteorite, which became an object of reverence and worship. I'm sure Sam can go into more detail on actual sources on what we read about the black stone, but there's no question. Muslims, what are you doing? You're going to smash every idol except for this black stone, which was this was a pagan object. This is what this fell from heaven for us. That's what the pagans believed. Other pagan groups in the ancient world believed the same thing about it. And interestingly enough, even the early Muslims recognized that there was something very, very wrong about this. Umar, the second rightly guided caliph, said to the black stone, he said, you can't do anything. I would never, ever, 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 ever kiss this black stone, this object of paganism, but for the fact that I saw Muhammad doing it. So early Muslims, even one of the rightly guided caliphs, recognized this object is associated with paganism. There's no way I'm going to go over there and kiss it the way the pagans are doing it. I'm not going to adopt this pagan practice, but I have to, because according to Surah 33:21, Muhammad is the example that all Muslims should follow. Therefore, if Muhammad is kissing this object of pagan idolatry, just the way the pagans were doing, then I'm going to do it too. And Muslims to this day, when they visit Mecca, will do everything they can to get close enough to the black stone to kiss it. Why? Because Muhammad did. Why did Muhammad do it? Because he grew up in the Quraysh tribe, and that was what they did. That's what the pagans of Mecca did. This seemed very natural to them, and now it's a part of Islam. So again, Muslims, what do you do? What do you do when you're pointing a finger at Christianity, saying it's been corrupted by paganism, and it hasn't? And yet when we turn to your religion and we look at almost every single practice you have, almost every single practice in your religion comes directly from the pagans. How can this not bother you? How can this not bother you? If I had a practice that was part of my religion and I immediately saw, oh, wait a minute, this was a pagan practice that was adopted by someone in my religion, I would be horrified. I would be horrified. And in Islam, it's not just one, it's not two, it's not three, it's not four, it's not five. It's almost everything you do as part of your religion was a pagan practice or a pagan belief. How can this not bother you? I don't know.
Okay, I have another question. It could be a kind of compromise with Muhammad and the tribe of Quraysh to make that reconciliation that they kept the Kaaba, and if there is anything has to do with the moon or the crescent, that there was people are worshipping that god of the moon or those eras.
Before we get into the moon god, whether Allah was a moon god, I just want to understand your question. Are you asking that Muhammad compromised with them?
No, yes.
Is what he's asking?
Yeah. Because he made a reconciliation with his tribe when he came back, and they
when he conquered
this
them?
big sheet, and they tried to, maybe he said, okay, I'm going to keep this Kaaba, but let's clean it up and
I don't think
clean
it's
it for the new God.
I don't think he did it because he was trying to compromise with them. Because
man, we're gonna have a debate on screen here.
well, no, because if you let me finish my point,
All right.
I thought you were on my side, but you see, this is what happens when it's live.
Okay.
Because he had them under his control, he had already subjugated them. So if the purpose was to compromise, to appease them, well, at this point in time, he has the power, and he subjugated them, and they're under his control. I actually think it's because he grew up steeped in these practices, and that he adopted as part of his religion. So I'm sure Dave's going to say that to compromise and to bring them in union with him, but he had already controlled them, subjugated them, and dominated them at the point that you're talking